Hi class, this may be the most valuable resource I give you, and this is a chapter 3 from someone's equity resource manual who took this class previously. I'm showing you intentionally a chapter 3 because I don't want it to be tempting to make your chapter 2 exactly like the model that I post. And so I'm using a different chapter as a model for you just because I know how that goes. It's like you start thinking in one direction and then yours ends up being pretty much identical to the model that you were looking at. No fault on your part, just the way it is. Okay, I'm just going to talk you through some aspects of this. And this is posted and you're going to see these comments on the one that I posted. So as you see, here's the introduction section, and here is the one sentence thesis that this person had, and it contains both a principle and a strategy, and that's what I want for your thesis. So basically, the principle that this person is communicating is the fact that American schools create largely inequitable educational experiences. Then she points out that there are things that teachers, educators need to do to resolve that issue. And so that's the strategy part. Teachers and administrators must take up the cause of pointing out where these inequities exist and creating new procedures. All right, so you can see that's a fairly general thesis, but nevertheless, it gets at the point of this chapter, which is, sort of the structural elements of educational settings. All right, so then we have the principles section. And in the principles section, she goes into more detail about her principle. And she talks about 3 practices that are inequitable. All right, and she goes into detail and has a paragraph on each of those. And then in the strategies section, she introduces strategies that will combat the various things that she's pointed out are inequitable. So she gives specific strategies for that. And you can see she's citing sources and so on throughout. And then finally down here in the references or resources, I sort of refer to it as a resources section, she lists 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 resources that relate to this chapter and are resources that people could then look at to help them think about this chapter. And the people that she wants to have looking at them are people in her audience. Now, you'll see that her descriptions are fairly long. I'm asking for 100 words. I think back when she was in my class, I asked for more detailed resource description. So I was asking at that point, I think, for 250 words, but I sort of cut back on that because these resources sections were getting really long and I understood that that wasn't necessary. So you need 5 resources and they need to be, your descriptions of them need to be 100 words long. All right, I have a little list of do's and don'ts. Actually, that in blue there is a note to her. But I have a list here of do's and don'ts that I want to talk to you about on this recording. And first of all, obviously, first and foremost, don't plagiarize. You are turning these in to a Turnitin Dropbox. I will be able to see if you have plagiarized. Turnitin marks it all in red if it comes from a published source, either on the web or a book or a journal article that has been published. So it becomes very obvious to me right away if plagiarism has occurred. And just let me remind you that if you are quoting someone word for word, you have to use quotation marks and you have to put a citation after the quoted material. If you are not quoting, but you're getting an idea from someone else, so this didn't come from your head, then you paraphrase, and along with your paraphrase, you still have to put a citation. I always tell my undergraduates, it's better to write a rotten paper than it is to plagiarize, because I can do something with rotten papers and I can do something with rotten paper writers. I can't do a lot with plagiarism. And so basically how this goes is you'll get a 0 for the chapter, and I will tell you you have to rewrite it. If it happens twice, then I will turn your name in to the dean. Sometimes people use as a method of writing that they will cut and paste quotes and so on into their work, and then hope that they remember later that those are actually quotes that they've taken from someplace else. You really shouldn't use that process. Your drafts that you hand in also should be your original work, because I'm grading them. A little technique that someone used in a previous session is, instead of writing their own resource descriptions, they just went and copied and pasted them from Amazon.com. Yeah, don't do that either. That's not a very good technique. Second of all, I want to tell you to give yourself some time to think. So don't expect that this is going to come out really well if you write it the night before you need to hand it in. I think that sort of goes without saying, but I know everybody is really stressed for time. In general, I know that for myself, it takes me about an hour per page. These are 3, 4, 5 pages long. Sometimes they get into the 6-page length. So you really need to be thinking that you're giving yourself an average of about 5 hours to get this written. Maybe I'm a really slow writer, but to get a good, nice piece of writing done, that's just basically how it goes for me. So give yourself time, but also don't sit and overthink this assignment. And especially for the chapter that you hand in first, chapter 2, just give it a good whack and hand it in. Make sure you haven't plagiarized, and I'll give you comments. And don't really even worry about your grade on that one, because it has never been the case that people have gotten grades lower than what they wanted, unless they got like zeros on them. But if you're getting like a C on a draft, that has never killed anyone's grade. So you'll be fine. So just hand it in and let me give you comments. And then you can sort of see, I try to get those comments turned around very quickly, and you'll see more of what I'm expecting from you. Okay, and then finally, I have had 1 or 2 students in the past who have just insisted that there is no need for this equity resource manual in their work setting or in any setting in their life. And basically, I know that to not be true. I know that even the church, as hard as we try, isn't isn't the most equitable place. So there's room for improvement at most any institution. If you are somehow associated with some sort of heavenly body or institution that is perfectly equitable, then one way you could write your equity resource manual is to dig into sort of the underlying reasons and procedures that ended up causing that institution to be so equitable. Because that takes a lot of work and intentionality. And so that would be an interesting story if you think you work at just a really special place, or your entire environment is this really special place that's perfectly equitable. If that's your story, then go with it, and in each of these chapters, tell how they got to be that special. Tell how they accomplished that. All right, I hope this helps.